It was a sunny Tuesday afternoon in downtown Springfield. The streets were busy with people walking around, shopping, and enjoying their day. Officer Derek Matthews was driving his police car slowly through the wealthy part of town. He had been a cop for 8 years, but he still felt like he owned these streets. Derek was the type of man who thought he could tell who belonged where just by looking at them. Derek was not a good police officer. He was lazy, mean, and worst of all, he treated people differently based on their skin color. The other cops at his station knew this about him, but nobody wanted to speak up. Derek had friends in high places and he made sure everyone knew it. He would often brag about how he could get away with anything because his uncle was friends with some important people in the city. On this particular day, Derek was feeling extra cocky. He had just gotten a small promotion at work, and his ego was bigger than ever. As he drove down Maple Street, one of the nicest streets in the city, he saw something that made him angry. There was a beautiful black woman walking confidently down the sidewalk. She was wearing an expensive-looking blue dress and carrying a designer handbag. Her hair was perfectly styled, and she walked with the grace of someone who was used to being respected. The woman was Dr. Patricia Williams, though Derek had no idea who she was. Patricia was 42 years old, and one of the best pediatric surgeons in the entire state. She had spent years studying and working hard to become successful. She had just finished a meeting at the Children's Hospital where she volunteered her time to help sick kids for free. Patricia was walking back to her car, enjoying the nice weather and thinking about her next surgery scheduled for tomorrow. What Derek didn't know was that Patricia was also the wife of Governor James Williams. She had been married to James for 15 years and they had 2 teenage children together. Patricia always tried to keep her husband's job separate from her own life. She wanted people to respect her for being a doctor, not because she was married to a powerful man. She rarely told people about her husband's position, and she didn't like when people treated her differently because of it. Derek pulled his police car up next to Patricia and rolled down his window. His face had an ugly expression on it, like he was looking at something that disgusted him. "Hey you," he called out rudely. "What are you doing here?" His voice was loud and harsh, making several people on the street turn their heads to look. Patricia stopped walking and turned to face the police officer. She was confused because she hadn't done anything wrong. She was just walking down a public street like any other citizen had the right to do. "Excuse me, officer," she said politely. "Is there some kind of problem?" Patricia had been raised to always be respectful to police officers even when they weren't being respectful to her. Derek got out of his car and walked over to where Patricia was standing. He was a big man, about 6 feet tall, and he used his size to try to intimidate people. "I asked you a question," he said, stepping closer to her. "This is a nice neighborhood. We don't usually see people like you around here." The way he said, "people like you," made it very clear what he meant. He was talking about her race, not about anything she had actually done. Patricia felt her heart start beating faster. She had experienced racism before in her life, especially when she was younger and still in medical school. But she thought those days were mostly behind her. She had worked so hard to become successful, and she lived in a world now where most people treated her with respect. To be confronted with such obvious prejudice in broad daylight in front of other people made her feel angry and sad at the same time. "Officer, I have every right to be here," Patricia said calmly. Though inside, she was upset. "I'm just walking down the street. I haven't broken any laws." She tried to keep her voice steady and respectful. Patricia knew that getting angry or raising her voice could make the situation much worse. She had learned long ago that when dealing with racist people, especially those in positions of power, staying calm was often the safest choice. By now, other people on the street had started to notice what was happening. A few people slowed down their walking to watch. Some took out their phones and started recording. Everyone could see that something wasn't right about this situation. An elderly white woman shook her head in disgust at what the officer was doing. A young couple whispered to each other about how unfair it looked. But nobody stepped forward to help Patricia because Derek was wearing a police uniform, and people were afraid to get involved. Derek noticed the small crowd that was starting to form around them. Instead of being embarrassed by his behavior, he seemed to enjoy having an audience. He puffed out his chest and put his hands on his hips, trying to look more important than he really was. "Let me see your ID," he demanded. "I want to know who you are and what you're doing in this neighborhood." Patricia knew that legally, she didn't have to show her ID unless she was suspected of committing a specific crime. But she also knew that refusing might make Derek even more aggressive. She slowly reached into her purse to get her driver's license. She made sure to move her hands slowly and keep them visible, because she knew that some police officers looked for any excuse to say they felt threatened. As Patricia handed over her license, she said quietly, "Officer, I hope you realize that you're stopping me for no reason other than the color of my skin. I'm a doctor, I pay taxes, and I deserve to be treated with the same respect as any other citizen." Her words were calm but firm. She wanted Derek to understand that she knew exactly what he was doing and why it was wrong. Derek barely looked at the license before handing it back to her. He had a mean smile on his face as he read her name out loud. "Dr. Patricia Williams," he said mockingly. "Well, Dr. Williams, maybe you should find a neighborhood where you fit in better. This area is for people who actually belong here." His words were cruel and stupid, and several people in the growing crowd gasped when they heard them. What Derek didn't know was that one of the people recording everything was Sarah Chen, a news reporter for the local TV station. Sarah had been walking back from getting coffee when she saw the confrontation start. She immediately recognized that this was exactly the kind of police misconduct that had been in the news so much lately. She started recording with her phone, and also called her news station to let them know what was happening. Sarah also recognized Patricia, though not because she was the governor's wife. Sarah had done a story about Patricia a few months earlier, highlighting her charity work at the children's hospital. Sarah knew that Patricia was one of the most respected doctors in the city, and that she spent her free time helping sick children, whose families couldn't afford expensive medical care. Seeing such a good person being treated so badly made Sarah's blood boil. The crowd kept growing as more people stopped to watch. Some were taking pictures and videos with their phones. Others were shaking their heads in anger at what they were seeing. A few people started making comments to each other about how wrong Derek's behavior was. The situation was quickly spinning out of Derek's control, but he was too arrogant and too racist to realize it. Patricia could feel the eyes of all these strangers on her, and she felt humiliated. She had been having such a good day after her successful meeting at the hospital. Now she was being treated like a criminal in front of dozens of people just because a racist cop had decided she didn't belong in a certain neighborhood. She thought about her teenage daughter and son, and how she would explain this to them when she got home. She thought about all the times she had told them that if they worked hard and were good people, they would be treated fairly. Now she wasn't sure if that was really true. Derek was enjoying himself too much to notice that he was making the biggest mistake of his career. He had no idea that the woman he was harassing was married to the most powerful man in the state. He had no idea that his behavior was being broadcast live on social media, and that thousands of people were already watching and sharing the videos. He had no idea that his life was about to change forever, and not in a good way. All Derek knew was that he felt powerful and in control. He thought he was putting someone in their place, and he liked how that felt. But Patricia Williams was not someone who could be put in any place other than exactly where she belonged, which was anywhere she chose to be. Derek was about to learn this lesson in the hardest way possible. Derek Matthews was feeling more powerful by the minute. He looked around at all the people watching him and Patricia, and instead of feeling ashamed, he felt proud. In his twisted mind, he thought he was doing something good by bothering this successful black woman. He had always believed that certain people didn't deserve to be in nice places, and today he was going to make sure everyone knew it. Patricia could see the ugly look in Derek's eyes getting worse. She had dealt with racist people before, but there was something especially dangerous about this police officer. He seemed to enjoy making her uncomfortable, and that scared her more than she wanted to admit. She looked around at all the people, watching and recording, hoping that someone would step in to help her, but everyone seemed too afraid to get involved with a police officer. "You know what, Dr. Williams?" Derek said with a nasty smile. "I think you're lying about being a doctor. You probably stole that ID from someone. People like you are always trying to pretend to be something you're not." His words were so cruel and stupid that several people in the crowd started shaking their heads and making angry comments to each other. Patricia felt like she had been slapped in the face. She had worked so hard to become a doctor. She had spent years studying, taking difficult tests, and learning how to save people's lives. She had performed hundreds of surgeries and helped countless children get better. To have someone suggest that she was lying about her career just because of her skin color was one of the most insulting things anyone had ever said to her. "Officer Matthews," Patricia said, reading his name tag carefully so she would remember it later. "I am indeed a doctor. I work at Springfield General Hospital and I specialize in pediatric surgery. I have spent my entire adult life helping sick children. I don't appreciate being called a liar, especially by someone who is supposed to serve and protect all citizens equally." Derek laughed in a mean way that made Patricia's skin crawl. "Serve and protect," he repeated mockingly. "Lady, I serve and protect the people who actually matter in this community, people who belong here, people who contribute something positive to society." The crowd was getting bigger now, and more people were taking out their phones to record what was happening. Derek was too focused on Patricia to notice that his behavior was being broadcast to the world. Sarah Chen, the news reporter, was still recording everything. She had already sent the video to her news station, and they were preparing to interrupt their regular programming to show what was happening live. Sarah could see that this situation was about to become a huge news story. She also noticed that the crowd was getting more and more upset with Derek's behavior. People were starting to speak up and tell him that what he was doing was wrong. "Hey, officer!" called out a young man from the crowd. "Leave that lady alone, she's not doing anything wrong." Other people started agreeing with him. "Yeah, this is ridiculous," shouted an older woman. "She's just walking down the street." Derek turned to look at the crowd with an angry expression on his face. "All of you need to mind your own business." Derek yelled at the crowd, "I'm conducting official police business here, and if any of you interfere, I'll arrest you too." His threat made some people step back, but it also made others even more angry. They could all see that there was no official police business happening here. There was just one racist cop harassing an innocent woman. Patricia watched Derek yell at the crowd, and she realized that this situation was getting dangerous. Derek was clearly out of control, and she was worried that he might hurt her or someone else. She decided to try to end this confrontation before it got even worse. "Officer Matthews," she said calmly, "I'm going to leave now. I haven't done anything wrong and I don't have to stay here and listen to your insults." But when Patricia started to walk away, Derek became even more angry. He couldn't stand the idea that she was ignoring his authority. "Don't you dare walk away from me," he shouted, grabbing Patricia's arm roughly. The crowd gasped when they saw him put his hands on her. Several people started yelling at Derek to let her go. "Officer, you are now physically restraining me without any legal reason," Patricia said firmly, though her heart was beating very fast. She was scared, but she tried not to show it. "I suggest you let go of me right now, before you make this situation even worse for yourself." There was something in her voice, a strength and confidence that made Derek pause for just a moment. Patricia's calm response in the face of such treatment impressed everyone watching. Here was a woman being harassed and grabbed by a police officer, and she was still speaking with dignity and intelligence. Many people in the crowd were thinking the same thing. This woman was clearly someone special, someone who deserved much better treatment than what she was getting. Derek still had his hand on Patricia's arm, and he could feel dozens of eyes watching him. He knew that what he was doing was wrong, but his pride wouldn't let him stop. He had gone too far to back down now. "You'll leave when I say you can leave," he said through gritted teeth. "I don't care who you think you are or what kind of fancy degree you claim to have." Just then, Derek's police radio crackled to life. "Unit 47, this is dispatch," came an urgent voice. "We need you to return to the station immediately. Chief Rodriguez wants to see you right away. This is priority 1. Derek looked confused. He had never heard the dispatcher sound so serious before. Usually when the chief wanted to see an officer, it was no big deal. But there was something in the dispatcher's voice that sounded almost panicked. Derek let go of Patricia's arm and walked back toward his police car. But he wasn't ready to give up yet. "This isn't over," he called back to Patricia. "I'm going to find out exactly who you really are. And if you're lying about anything, you're going to be in big trouble." Patricia rubbed her arm where Derek had grabbed her. She knew there would probably be a bruise there tomorrow. As Derek got back in his car, Patricia looked around at all the people who had witnessed what just happened. Many of them looked embarrassed and sorry that they hadn't done more to help her. "Ma'am," said an elderly gentleman, "I'm so sorry about what just happened to you. That officer was completely out of line." Other people nodded in agreement and started coming forward to offer their support. "Thank you all for witnessing this," Patricia said to the crowd. "What happened here today is exactly the kind of behavior that we as a community need to speak out against. No one should be treated this way, regardless of their race or background." Her words were powerful and several people started clapping. Sarah Chen approached Patricia with her microphone. "Dr. Williams, I'm Sarah Chen from Channel 7 News. Would you be willing to speak with me about what just happened?" Patricia recognized Sarah from her previous interview about the charity work at the hospital. "Hello, Sarah," Patricia said with a tired smile. "I remember you, and yes, I think it's important that people know about this incident." As Patricia spoke with Sarah, Derek was driving back to the police station, completely unaware that his world was about to fall apart. He had no idea that the woman he had just harassed was married to the governor. He had no idea that videos of his behavior were already spreading across social media like wildfire. He had no idea that his career as a police officer was about to end in the most humiliating way possible. Back at the police station, Chief Rodriguez was pacing around his office like a caged animal. He had just gotten off the phone with the mayor, who had just gotten off the phone with the governor's office. The chief's hands were shaking as he tried to figure out how to handle the disaster that was heading his way. He had seen the live video feed that was now being broadcast on multiple news channels and shared thousands of times on social media. The chief knew Derek Matthews was a problem officer, but he had never imagined that Derek would be stupid enough to harass the governor's wife on camera in front of dozens of witnesses. The chief also knew that this incident was going to bring unwanted attention to his entire police department. There would be investigations, protests, and probably lawsuits. His own job might be in danger because of Derek's racist behavior. As Derek pulled into the police station parking lot, he was still feeling cocky and self-satisfied. He thought he had showed that uppity woman who was boss. He thought he had proven his authority to everyone who was watching. He had no idea that in just a few minutes, he would discover that he had made the biggest mistake of his entire life. The truth was about to hit Derek Matthews like a freight train, and nothing would ever be the same for him again. Derek Matthews walked into the Springfield police station feeling like he was on top of the world. He was still thinking about how he had put that black woman in her place. In his sick mind, he believed he had done something good for the community. He straightened his uniform and walked through the hallways with his chest puffed out, expecting other officers to congratulate him for his good work. But something was strange. The other police officers in the station were looking at him with worried expressions. Some were whispering to each other and pointing in his direction. A few officers who usually said hello to Derek completely ignored him and walked away quickly when they saw him coming. Derek was confused by their behavior, but he was too full of himself to really pay attention to the warning signs. Meanwhile, back on Maple Street, Patricia Williams was finishing her interview with Sarah Chen. The crowd of people who had witnessed Derek's behavior was still there, and many of them were sharing their own stories about times when they had seen police officers treat people unfairly. Patricia listened to their stories with a heavy heart, realizing that what had happened to her was not unusual at all. "Dr. Williams," Sarah said as she wrapped up the interview, "I want you to know that this story is going to be seen by a lot of people. What happened to you today was completely wrong, and the public needs to know about it." Patricia nodded sadly. She had never wanted to be famous for something like this. She would have preferred to stay out of the news entirely and just focus on her work as a doctor. Sarah's phone was buzzing constantly with calls from her news station. The video of Derek harassing Patricia was already being shared across social media faster than anyone could count. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok were all filled with people expressing their anger about what they had seen. The hashtag Tonner Justice for Dr. Williams was starting to trend, and people were demanding that Derek be fired immediately. Back at the police station, Chief Rodriguez was having the worst day of his career. His phone had not stopped ringing for the past 30 minutes. The mayor had called him 3 times. The governor's office had called twice. Local news stations were calling every few minutes wanting statements. And worst of all, his own boss, the police commissioner, had called to tell him that he better have a good explanation for what was happening. The chief had watched the video of Derek's behavior at least 10 times, and each time it made him feel sicker. Derek had not just embarrassed himself, he had embarrassed the entire police department. The chief knew that this incident was going to cause problems for months, maybe even years to come. There would be protests, investigations, and probably lawsuits. The department's reputation was going to be ruined because of one racist officer. Sergeant Williams, no relation to Patricia, knocked on the chief's door. "Sir, Officer Matthews just arrived. Should I send him in?" The chief took a deep breath and nodded. "Send him in, and Sergeant, close the door behind him and make sure we're not disturbed." The sergeant could hear the stress in the chief's voice and knew that Derek was about to face the consequences of his actions. Derek walked into the chief's office with a big smile on his face. "Good afternoon, Chief Rodriguez. I heard you wanted to see me. I hope it's about a commendation for the good police work I did today." Derek was so clueless that he actually thought he might be getting praised for what he had done to Patricia. Chief Rodriguez looked at Derek like he was looking at the stupidest person who had ever lived. "Sit down, Matthews," the chief said in a voice that was barely controlled anger. "We need to talk." Derek sat down, but he was still smiling. He had no idea that his entire world was about to collapse around him. "Matthews, do you have any idea what you've done today?" the chief asked slowly. Derek shrugged his shoulders. "I was just doing my job, Chief. I saw a suspicious person in the wealthy district and I investigated. That's what we're supposed to do, right?" The chief stared at Derek in amazement. How could anyone be so ignorant and racist? The chief turned his computer monitor around so Derek could see it. On the screen was the video of Derek harassing Patricia, and underneath it were thousands of angry comments from people all over the country. "This is you, isn't it, Matthews?" the chief asked. Derek looked at the screen and his smile started to fade a little bit. "Yeah, that's me," Derek said, starting to sound less confident. "But Chief, you don't understand. That woman was acting suspicious. She didn't belong in that neighborhood. I was just doing my job." The chief's face was turning red with anger. How could Derek still not understand what he had done wrong? "Your job," the chief shouted, losing his temper. "Your job is to serve and protect all citizens, not to harass innocent people because you don't like the color of their skin." Derek jumped in his chair, startled by the chief's outburst. He had never seen Chief Rodriguez this angry before. The chief took a deep breath and tried to calm down. "Matthews, the woman you harassed today is Dr. Patricia Williams. She's one of the most respected doctors in this entire state. She saves children's lives for a living. She volunteers her time to help poor families get medical care. She's exactly the kind of person we should be protecting, not attacking." Derek was starting to feel uncomfortable, but he still didn't understand the full picture. "Okay, so she's a doctor," he said defensively. "That doesn't change the fact that she was acting suspicious. I had every right to question her." The chief shook his head in disbelief. Derek was still trying to justify his racist behavior even after being shown the video evidence. "Matthews, there's something else you need to know about Dr. Patricia Williams," the chief said slowly. "She's married to Governor James Williams. You didn't just harass a random citizen today. You harassed the First Lady of our state, on camera, in front of dozens of witnesses." The words hit Derek like a punch to the stomach. His face went completely white and his mouth fell open. "What?" he whispered, suddenly understanding that he was in serious trouble. She's married to the governor?" The chief nodded grimly. "That's right, Matthews. The governor's wife. The woman you grabbed and insulted and told to go back to where she belongs is married to the most powerful man in this state. And thanks to you, this entire incident is now national news." Derek felt like he was going to throw up. His hands started shaking and sweat began forming on his forehead. "Chief, I didn't know," he stammered. "If I had known who she was, I never would have." The chief cut him off with a wave of his hand. "If you had known who she was?" The chief repeated angrily. "Matthews, it shouldn't matter who she was. You should treat every citizen with respect, whether they're married to the governor or whether they're homeless. That's what being a police officer means." Derek's whole world was crashing down around him. He thought about his wife and kids at home. He thought about his mortgage payments and his car payments. He thought about how he was going to explain this to his family. Most of all, he thought about how stupid and arrogant he had been just a few hours earlier. "The governor's office has already called," the chief continued. "They want a full investigation. The mayor's office has called. The police commissioner has called. The media is calling every 5 minutes. Matthews, you haven't just destroyed your own career today. You've created a public relations nightmare for this entire department." Derek tried to speak, but his voice came out as just a croak. "Chief, what's going to happen to me?" The chief looked at him with a mixture of anger and disgust. "What's going to happen to you? You're suspended immediately without pay. There will be a full investigation. You'll probably be fired. And if Dr. Williams decides to press charges for assault, you might end up in jail." The room was silent, except for the sound of Derek's heavy breathing. He couldn't believe how quickly his life had fallen apart. Just a few hours ago, he had been a police officer with a steady job and a regular paycheck. Now he was facing unemployment, public humiliation, and possibly even criminal charges. "Turn in your badge and your gun," the chief said finally. "You're not a police officer anymore, Matthews. You're just another civilian who made a very stupid mistake." Derek's hands were shaking so badly that he could barely remove his badge from his uniform. As he placed it on the chief's desk, he realized that his career in law enforcement was over. Outside the police station, news trucks were already starting to arrive. Reporters were setting up cameras and preparing to broadcast live updates about the story. Social media was exploding with outrage, and people were demanding justice for Dr. Patricia Williams. Derek's racist behavior had been seen by millions of people, and there was no way to take it back. Derek walked out of the police station as a disgraced former officer, knowing that his life would never be the same again. Derek Matthews stumbled out of the police station like a man in a bad dream. His legs felt weak and his head was spinning. Just 2 hours ago, he had been a police officer with a steady job and benefits. Now he was unemployed, disgraced, and facing the possibility of criminal charges. The weight of what he had done was finally hitting him, and it felt like a mountain crushing down on his chest. As Derek walked to his personal car in the parking lot, he noticed something that made his stomach drop even further. There were news vans pulling up to the police station. Reporters were getting out with cameras and microphones, ready to tell the world about his terrible mistake. Derek pulled his jacket up over his head and tried to walk quickly to his car without being seen. But it was too late. "Officer Matthews! Officer Matthews!" shouted a reporter from Channel 9 News. "Can you comment on your interaction with Dr. Patricia Williams today?" Derek ignored the reporter and tried to get to his car faster, but more reporters were arriving every minute. Soon there was a small crowd of journalists trying to ask him questions. "Do you have anything to say to Dr. Williams?" called out another reporter. "Do you regret your actions today?" Derek finally reached his car and jumped inside, slamming the door shut. Through his windows, he could see camera flashes going off. As reporters took pictures of him, he started his car and drove away as fast as he could, leaving the reporters behind. Meanwhile, Dr. Patricia Williams had finally made it back to her own car. She sat in the driver's seat for several minutes, just trying to process everything that had happened to her. Her hands were still shaking a little bit from the encounter with Derek. She looked at her arm where he had grabbed her and could see that it was already starting to bruise. The physical pain was nothing compared to the emotional hurt she was feeling. Patricia took out her phone and saw that she had 17 missed calls. Most of them were from her husband, Governor James Williams. There were also calls from her children, her friends, and several reporters who had somehow gotten her phone number. Patricia realized that news of what had happened was spreading very quickly. She decided to call her husband before driving home, James answered on the first ring. "Patricia, thank God you're okay. I've been trying to reach you for the past hour. Are you hurt?" His voice was filled with worry and anger. Patricia could tell that he had already heard about what happened, probably from his staff who monitored news and social media constantly. "I'm okay, James," Patricia said, though her voice was tired. "I'm bruised, but I'm not seriously hurt." "How did you find out so quickly?" James explained that his communications director had seen the video trending on social media and had immediately called him. By now, the video had been shared hundreds of thousands of times, and major news networks were picking up the story. "Patricia, I am so sorry this happened to you," James said, and she could hear the pain in his voice. "No one should ever be treated the way that officer treated you, and the fact that you're my wife makes this even more outrageous. I promise you that there will be consequences for this." Patricia appreciated her husband's support, but she also knew that this situation was bigger than just being about her. "James, I don't want this to be about me being the governor's wife," Patricia said firmly. "What happened to me today happens to other people all the time. People who don't have powerful husbands to protect them. This needs to be about police accountability and treating all citizens fairly, not about my connection to you." James loved his wife even more for saying that. After 15 years of marriage, he still admired her strength and her commitment to doing what was right. "You're absolutely right," he said. "But Patricia, whether we like it or not, this is going to be a big news story. Are you prepared for that kind of attention?" While Patricia was talking to her husband, the story was exploding across the internet. The video of Derek harassing her had now been viewed over 2 million times. People from all over the country were sharing it and expressing their outrage. The hashtag #JaR for Dr. Williams was trending on Twitter, along with YAR police brutality, and racism is real. Comments were pouring in from celebrities, politicians, and ordinary citizens. "This is exactly the kind of behavior that proves we need police reform," wrote one congresswoman. "Dr. Williams showed incredible grace under pressure, but no one should have to endure this kind of treatment," posted a famous actor. Thousands of regular people shared their own stories of being mistreated by police officers. Back at his house, Derek was discovering just how famous he had become, and not in a good way. His phone was ringing constantly with calls from reporters, but he was too scared to answer any of them. His wife, Linda, had seen the video on Facebook, and she was furious with him. "Derek, how could you do something so stupid?" Linda shouted at him as soon as he walked through the front door. "Do you realize what you've done to our family? Our neighbors are already calling and asking if it's really you in that video. The kids are going to be humiliated at school tomorrow." Derek sat down heavily on his couch and put his head in his hands. "Linda, I didn't know who she was," he said weakly. "If I had known she was married to the governor, I never would have." Linda cut him off angrily. "Derek, that's exactly the problem. It shouldn't matter who she was married to. You shouldn't treat anyone that way." Linda had put up with Derek's racist comments at home for years, always hoping he would change. But seeing him humiliate an innocent woman on video was more than she could stand. Derek's teenage son, Kyle, came downstairs with his phone in his hand. "Dad, all my friends are texting me about this video. They're saying you're racist. Is it true? Did you really grab that lady for no reason?" Kyle looked ashamed and confused. Derek had always told his son to respect all people, but his actions today proved that he didn't follow his own advice. "Kyle, it's complicated," Derek said. But even as he said it, he knew it wasn't complicated at all. He had harassed an innocent woman because of her race, and now the whole world knew what kind of person he really was. There was no way to explain it or make it sound better than it was. Derek's phone buzzed with a text message from his brother. "Saw the video. Can't believe you were that stupid. Don't call me until you figure out how to fix this mess." Even Derek's own family was turning away from him. He was starting to realize that his actions had consequences that went far beyond just losing his job. On the evening news, Dr. Patricia Williams's story was the top headline on every channel. News anchors were calling it a shocking example of police harassment and a clear case of racial profiling. Legal experts were being interviewed about whether Derek could face criminal charges for assault. Civil rights leaders were calling for a complete investigation of the Springfield Police Department. Dr. Patricia Williams was also being interviewed on several news programs. She handled every interview with the same grace and intelligence that she had shown during her encounter with Derek. "I hope this incident can be a learning experience for everyone," she said during one interview. "We need to have honest conversations about race and police accountability in our communities." Meanwhile, Governor James Williams was meeting with his senior staff to discuss how to respond to the situation. His chief of staff recommended that he make a public statement calling for Derek to be prosecuted to the full extent of the law. His communications director suggested using this opportunity to push for police reform legislation. "I want to be very careful here," Governor Williams told his staff. "This is personal for me because it happened to my wife, but it's also bigger than just our family. We need to respond in a way that supports justice for everyone, not just because Patricia happens to be married to me." By the end of the day, Derek Matthews had become one of the most hated people in America. His name was trending on social media, for all the wrong reasons. Thousands of people were calling for him to be arrested and prosecuted. Some were even calling for him to be banned from ever working in law enforcement again. Derek spent that night lying awake in bed, staring at the ceiling and thinking about how quickly his life had fallen apart. He kept replaying the encounter with Dr. Williams in his mind, wishing he could go back and do things differently. But it was too late for regrets. The damage was done, and there was no way to undo it. The next morning would bring even more consequences, as Derek was about to discover that losing his job was just the beginning of his problems. 3 weeks had passed since Derek Matthews made the biggest mistake of his life. The world had not forgotten what he did to Dr. Patricia Williams. In fact, things had only gotten worse for Derek as more details about his past behavior came to light. Other people who had been mistreated by Derek started coming forward with their own stories, and a pattern of racist behavior became clear to everyone. Derek woke up on this particular Monday morning to the sound of his phone ringing. He had been getting calls from lawyers, reporters, and angry strangers for weeks now, so he usually just let the phone ring. But this call was from a number he recognized. It was his lawyer, Mr. Thompson, calling with news about his case. "Derek, I have some bad news," Mr. Thompson said when Derek answered. "The district attorney has decided to press criminal charges against you for assault and civil rights violations. You're going to have to turn yourself in to the police station by tomorrow morning." Derek felt his stomach drop. He had been hoping that maybe the criminal charges would be dropped, but now his worst fears were coming true. "What does this mean for me?" Derek asked, though he already knew the answer would be terrible. Mr. Thompson explained that Derek could face up to 2 years in prison if he was convicted. He would also likely face a civil lawsuit from Dr. Williams, which could cost him hundreds of thousands of dollars in damages. Derek's life was completely ruined, and there was no way to fix it. After hanging up with his lawyer, Derek looked around his empty house. His wife Linda had taken their children and moved in with her sister 2 weeks ago. She had filed for divorce and told Derek that she couldn't stand to be married to someone who treated people the way he had treated Dr. Williams. Derek's son, Kyle, had refused to speak to him since seeing the video, and his daughter Emma was too embarrassed to tell her friends what her father's name was. Derek had also lost his house. Since he was no longer getting paid by the police department, he couldn't make his mortgage payments. The bank had started foreclosure proceedings, and Derek would have to move out within the next month. All of his neighbors avoided him now, and some had even put up signs in their yard saying racism is not welcome here, after learning that Derek lived on their street. Meanwhile, Dr. Patricia Williams was at Springfield General Hospital, doing what she did best, saving children's lives. She was in the middle of a complicated surgery on a 7-year-old boy who had been in a car accident. Despite everything that had happened to her, Patricia had refused to let Derek's behavior change her daily routine. She was still the same dedicated doctor she had always been. The surgery went perfectly, and the little boy was going to make a full recovery. As Patricia washed her hands after the operation, she thought about how different her life was from Derek's right now. While Derek was facing prison time and had lost everything, Patricia was still helping people and making a positive difference in the world. The contrast between their two paths showed how different their characters really were. That afternoon, Patricia received a call from Chief Rodriguez at the Springfield Police Department. "Dr. Williams, I wanted to call and personally update you on Officer Matthews' case," the chief said. "He has been officially fired from the police department, and criminal charges have been filed against him. I also want you to know that we are implementing new training programs to make sure something like this never happens again." Patricia appreciated the chief's call, but she knew that Derek's punishment was just the beginning of the changes that needed to happen. "Chief Rodriguez, I'm glad that Mr. Matthews is facing consequences for his actions, but I hope you understand that this incident revealed bigger problems within your department. One racist officer doesn't act in isolation. There are usually systems and cultures that allow this kind of behavior to continue." The chief knew that Patricia was right. The investigation into Derek's behavior had revealed that other officers had witnessed him making racist comments before, but nobody had reported him. There had been complaints from citizens about Derek's behavior in the past, but they had been ignored or covered up. The entire department needed to change, not just Derek. 6 months later, Derek Matthews was sitting in a jail cell, wearing an orange jumpsuit instead of a police uniform. He had been convicted on all charges and sentenced to 18 months in prison. The trial had been covered extensively in the media, and Derek's racist behavior had been exposed for the whole world to see. During the trial, 5 other people had testified about times when Derek had harassed them because of their race. The civil lawsuit had also been settled. Derek had to pay Dr. Williams $500,000 in damages, money that he didn't have and would probably never be able to fully repay. His lawyer had advised him to declare bankruptcy, which meant losing what little he had left. Derek would be getting out of prison as a convicted felon with no money, no job prospects, and a reputation that would follow him for the rest of his life. Derek spent his days in prison thinking about the choices that had led him to this place. He had grown up in a racist family that taught him to hate people who were different from him. He had chosen to become a police officer not to serve and protect, but to have power over others. He had chosen to harass Dr. Williams that day because he thought he could get away with it. Every choice had been his own, and now he was paying the price. Dr. Patricia Williams, on the other hand, had used her experience to make positive changes in the world. She had worked with the governor's office to pass new police accountability laws. She had started a foundation that provided legal support to victims of police misconduct. She had spoken at dozens of conferences and events about the importance of treating all people with dignity and respect. Patricia had also continued her work as a pediatric surgeon, saving more children's lives and training new doctors. She had received several awards for her medical work and her advocacy for civil rights. Unlike Derek, who had used his position to hurt people, Patricia used her platform to help others and make the world a better place. The contrast between Derek and Patricia's lives 1 year after their encounter was striking. Derek was a convicted criminal who had lost everything because of his hatred and prejudice. Patricia was more respected and successful than ever, using her experience to fight for justice and equality. Their story showed the world that actions have consequences, and that treating people with hatred and disrespect will ultimately destroy the person who chooses that path. Derek would eventually be released from prison, but he would never be able to escape the consequences of what he had done. The video of him harassing Dr. Williams would live on the internet forever, a permanent reminder of his racist behavior. He would struggle to find work, housing, and relationships for the rest of his life. Dr. Patricia Williams, meanwhile, continued to live a life of purpose and meaning. She had turned a terrible experience into an opportunity to create positive change, proving that dignity and grace are more powerful than hatred and ignorance. Her story inspired millions of people around the world to stand up against racism and fight for equality. The lesson was clear. Those who choose hatred will ultimately destroy themselves, while those who choose love and justice will build a better world for everyone.